have you go. I would like to hear a little bit more from Farah if you'd like to weigh in.
I was just going to ask, maybe I missed it. So what do you think the ideal form of marriage is? Like the woman goes to college and then she meets a guy in college and then she taps out of her career?
I don't know that going to college is really great for anybody these days. I'm pro-education, obviously. I mean, and I'm not even one of these conservatives who says, you should all just study engineering or whatever. I think that's bunk. I think you should read old books and acculturate yourself. But I don't think most colleges accomplish this these days, including the really fancy colleges, Harvard, Yale, Princeton. I don't know that maybe you can get an education there. I'm not totally convinced you can. And so, I get women should be educated. But, frankly, these days, you send your kids to a homeschool co-op, they'll start learning Latin in the 3rd grade. You send your kids on the track to go to Yale or Harvard, and they're probably not going to know anything by the time they graduate. I would love my wife to be educated. My wife is extremely educated, and I would love my wife to be a wife and a mother. And I guess the image that I think of for marriage is not as, the modern way of talking about it, where you say, this is my partner. It sounds like a gay accounting firm, this is my total indistinguishable partner. No, I want a wife, man, and I want a mother for my children. I want to be a father, and that involves different roles, and that involves complementarity.
Well, that's what I'm asking. So are you saying that like maybe they'll get educated outside of college, reading books or whatever, and then after that they should focus like at age 23, 24, getting married and then not pursuing a career and focus on family life? Yeah,
I'm not going to prescribe exactly at what age people ought to get married. They certainly ought to get married younger. I wish I'd gotten married younger. But I don't...
But you would prescribe that they focus on a career with precedence to
Generally speaking, I think women will be less happy if they are going to the widget factory to work for Mr. McGillicuddy so that they can make money that I will then receive from my wife to pay some other woman to raise our children. Mm-hmm. I think that's an extremely inefficient and disordered way to have a marriage, and I don't think it makes anybody particularly happy.
I guess it confuses me coming from a tradcon because you guys believe in the design of a lot of things. You believe in like the design of sex and what's like the most optimal use of sex. Why did God give us sex? Yes, and you would say like the end of sex would be to pair bond and reproduce. So if women were not meant to pursue careers, why would God, according to your Christian purview, you're Christian, right?
Yeah.
Like equip us with so many rational faculties. Like why are women so good at like aerospace engineering, nanotech, pediatrics,
I don't know if I'd say they're so good at aerospace engineering.
Why are women
scoring higher than you guys in every subject?
Why is it that
they're not totally represented in these fields?
My question is, if tradcons use God as like their purview for, you know what I mean, use our faculties as the metric for what we should be pursuing,
about this.
Why is it that women are now outgraduating men like basically 2-1, but then you guys are prescribing?
Because the colleges are total nonsense now, and they have a bunch of fake majors, and it's a scam.
It's law fake major? Because this is now we have more female first-year associates.
Right, and law school is largely a scam, too, and you've got a glut of lawyers.
Well, my question is, why would God equip us with these things, these faculties, if God did not want us as women to pursue these faculties and instead abandon it at first step for marriage and kids?
The premise of your question is that raising children and running a family in the domestic economy is not a rational activity.
It's not that it's a rational activity, but why equip us to be so good at STEM and college and all these pursuits?
What could be more important than raising a family?
I'm saying why give women the ability to both have a child and still be able to read like intellectual texts or
to educate the child.
Look at aerospace engineering. Well, that's the thing. You can
to raise your kid to be an aerospace engineer. I guess,
but
if
you
you're really
can't be an aerospace engineer yourself.
Women can if they like. They generally don't do that.
No, I'm asking. So is that your position, that God equipped women to be as good at STEM, to outgraduate men, all to just pursue homeschooling for their children?
If you look at like Fields Medal recipients, Larry Summers got fired from Harvard for pointing this out, but this is the top prize in mathematics. Until about 10 years ago, no woman had ever won the prize, and now I think one woman has won it. And I'm not knocking, there are plenty of women who are much more intelligent than me. The reason Larry Summers, who's as far as social scientists goes, is a very respected one, and he's a big lib. But he pointed out that the reason why men tend to dominate in the highest intellectual fields is not because men are simply smarter than women, but because the bell curve of intelligence for men is wider than that of women. So,
but for a society, isn't it like societies that allow women to work, even us, if we hadn't had women, we brought in like trillions of dollars to the economy to take out half of the minds in the world.
Yeah, I think life is about more than money.
I agree, but if you want a flourishing, wealthy society, you can't do that by eliminating women from the workforce.
I agree that we're wealthier today than we were 50 years ago. I'm not sure that we're flourishing more than we are. I mean, we are literally a dying society, right? We haven't had above replacement births since 1971.
Would you be okay with immigration as a way to...
That's why we have mass migration, but mass migration causes all sorts of social social problems, which is why it's deeply unpopular.
Before we pivot,
I
do want to pin down your position on this. So yes, the bell curve is wider for men, but on average, the average women are smarter than the average men. Obviously, at the ends of the curves, there's more unintelligent men and more high intelligent.
The first thing you said that wouldn't imply the second, right?
It's not implied. That's just the fact. Is the bell curve is wider for men. Like there's more unintelligent men and more intelligent men.
Are you talking about the greater male variability hypothesis? Is that
I'm saying there's on average women are more intelligent than men, but if you look at the most intelligent people, they're more likely to be men. If you look at the least intelligent people, they're less likely to be men. So I'm asking you from your Christian purview, because if you're a nihilist, you're atheist, you could just be like, oh, that's randomized, who cares? It doesn't necessarily mean it's best for society.
If you're a nihilist, you can't say anything at all, because nothing means anything.
Well, that was my point. If you're a nihilist, you could just say those curves should not be indication of how we should live society. But as a Christian, if you think sex is most optimized for certain purposes, you would probably think intelligence is best optimized for certain purposes. So why would God equip the average woman to be smarter than men? Do you think it's just for homeschooling their children?
Again, the claim that you made at first, which is that men and women have bell curves, the men's bell curve being wider than the woman's, would not imply that the average woman is smarter than the average man.
Oh, no.
It would line them up exactly.
The curve itself implies or actually indicates that
no, it would
on
just
average...
be the extremes.
No. If you actually look at the curves, at the top, it's women. The women's curve is taller than the men's curve.
But the IQ of the curve would be on the x-axis, right? That's where you get the extremes. So I think.
So are you disputing that on average women are more intelligent than men?
As would Larry Summers, as would the people who have studied this. But again, I think it's secondary to the point. Your point is the more interesting point of your.
Why would God equip us to be
God
so good at school and STEM? If women on average were doing really, really poorly in STEM and all these, like if men were the one outgraduating us 2-1, then I can understand from a Christian purview saying like, see, God doesn't want you to be good at school because God wants you to focus on these more domestic pursuits. Yeah. But how can you look at all this evidence and think that we're so specifically designed by God and then deny that?
I think you've bought the big lie of feminism that goes back to Mary Wollstonecraft, which is that men are endowed with greater virtue than women, and I think it's just bunk.
I'm saying the opposite.
You're saying what you're saying is that the most important things to do, the most impressive things to do, just the greatest stuff to do, is to do what most men do, which is go out and work some job.
No, I didn't even moralize. I didn't even say that STEM and aerospace and all these industries that women are good at are even morally good. I was just saying they happen to be good at these things. But from a Christian purview, you're the one who would ascribe morality to that.
You're saying it's better to do that, I think, because you're saying
from a Christian purview, because you think from a Christian purview, what you're good at is what you should do. So if women are better at childbearing, they should do that. If sex is best used in this specific then people should do that.
In that narrow reading, then I think it's pretty clear most women are better at raising children than building rocket ships. So I think probably most women would prefer that. But even more broadly, I think you're exalting male professions in a foolish way. I think that you're I'm
not even hyping them up. I'm just asking you.
I think you are hyping
from
them up.
Your theist purview, why would God make women so good at STEM and college and all these pursuits if God just wanted us to tap out as soon as we met a man and just focus on childbearing?
Look, women do fine on certain tests, but
we're doing great.
You're doing great.
On a lot of tests.
Sure.
Better than you.
Well, perhaps. I don't know.
No, I mean, the future...
I defer to your knowledge of your...
The future of academia is unequivocally female. Do you deny that?
I agree that the future of academia is bleak. And so if you think that it implies that women will dominate academia, then you said it, not me. But I don't think that the future of anything is female. I think the future of the human race will be the complementarity of the sexes and marriages and children, or there will be no future of the human race.
This is something I also wanted to point out to earlier. You're saying that people are having less children, that's a bad thing, but I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. And the reason why, at least from what we see when we compare better developed countries to less developed countries, is that people are choosing to have fewer children, but they're choosing to invest more in those fewer children. So back in agricultural times, people had to have a lot of children because they had to have those children work in the farm, basically take over chores, take over a bunch of stuff. So they would have 7 or 8 children, a lot of times malnourished, a lot of them died, versus now where it's like, they might have 1 or 2 children, but those children are well-fed, they're getting well-educated.
They're getting all the best psychiatric drugs in the country.
Well, do you think that, I guess here's the other problem. Earlier on, we were talking about hey, you know what, things are getting better measured now than before. That's why the whole thing about like, oh, people are less happy now is not necessarily true. Do you think that, let's say, middle of nowhere country in Africa or something, where they're malnourished, have a family of 7, do you think those people are happier because they can't report it, or they're living technically more of a traditional lifestyle than like somebody in a Nordic country or European country?
Yeah, I think the word traditional is doing a lot of work there. I agree that sub-Saharan Africa and Oklahoma are different, but I don't think it's a totally fair comparison. And I agree it's better to be nourished than to be malnourished. I agree with that as well. But I don't think that one necessarily needs 2 lawyer incomes and a Tesla and a big screen TV and 5 iPhones to be able to thrive and flourish. I think we've become far too materialistic, and we now know the price of everything and the value of nothing. So we've got more money than ever, but we're all miserable.
But when you cited the data on the 2-parent households, but socioeconomic status and education, especially maternal education, are big predictors of childhood outcomes. So how come the data on 2-parent households, we should follow that, but not the one on...
I'm fine with women being smart. I like when women are smart and well educated, because they're raising my children, One is raising my children. I'm not, if I were living in Africa, maybe I'd have 5.
This is where you deviate from the red pill.
Right, true. But, it is said that the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. So when a man chooses a woman to be his wife and to raise his family, he is entrusting her with his life, so I don't think he wants her to be a dummy or to be vicious or to be anything like that. He would have no incentive to do so.
But it's better to have fewer kids that you can, it seems like, provide more for and make sure than to have 10 kids and none of those kids end up being or flourishing.
I think it's good to be open to life. I think that one of the big problems in our society is that we've embraced sterility. So we're sterile intellectually, artistically, philosophically, and literally. We don't have any kids, and we exalt as some kind of supposed political right sterile forms of sex. So I wouldn't recommend that at all. And I think when you get married, to my earlier point, you're giving yourself wholly over to another person. And so you shouldn't withhold anything. You should be totally open to life for the unity of the spouses.
Is that practical in modern society? I feel like you have a very idealistic view.
Oh, no, I think I can tell you from experience.
Well, you're
it's
very
totally
successful.
Practical.
You're very successful. You're not struggling to feed your kids.
I'm not. I haven't been totally canceled yet. That's true. But I know people who make less money than I do.
I have
a lot less money, and they've got a million kids, and they're very